Before starting the next lesson, try this warm-up question. Place these numbers in order on a number line. So here I have a number line, 0 in the middle, positive numbers increase to the right, negative numbers to the left. So just place these numbers in order on the number line. See how you do. Most people find this easiest if they change all the fractions into decimals. So 1 divided by 3 is 0.33 repeated. Negative 7 divided by 10 is negative 0.7. 5 divided by 4 is 1.25. Now that they're all in decimals, a lot of people find this easier to place them on the number line. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about rational numbers, what those are, and what to do with them. A rational number can be written as a fraction. For example, the number 4.4, the number 25, the number -2, and the square root of 9. These are all rational numbers because I can write 4.4 as 44 over 10. I can write 25 as 25 over 1. I can write -2 as -2 over 1. And the square root of 9 is just 3, which is 3 over 1. So I can write all of these numbers as a fraction. Therefore, they are rational numbers. So where does the word rational come from? Well, the root of the word is ratio. So a ratio is a fraction. So that's where the word rational comes from when we're talking about numbers. Now, on the flip side of that, an irrational number can't be written as a fraction. For example, the square root of 2, the square root of 3, pi, and another number called e, which is kind of like pi, except it's just a different number. Any of these numbers, they are decimals that keep going on and on and on forever without repeating. So you cannot write them as a fraction. So in this lesson, we're going to focus on rational numbers, numbers that can be written as fractions, and we're going to look at operations with rational numbers. And you've actually done this before. We just didn't call them rational numbers yet. We just called them fractions. But it's the same thing. We could add and subtract, we could multiply, and we could divide fractions. So just remember the rules for these operations. When you're adding and subtracting, you need to have a common denominator. When you're multiplying, you multiply straight across. Numerator times numerator, and denominator times denominator. When you're dividing, just remember, you can just multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal is just when you switch the numerator and the denominator. So let's just work through some examples. Here, let's evaluate. Remember, evaluate just means get the value. 4/3 divided by -1/6. So we are dividing by a fraction, which is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. Now that we're multiplying, we multiply straight across. Numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. And now we get our new fraction. And we have to just remember to put it in lowest terms. And if you're not sure how to put it into lowest terms, you have to look for a number that can go into both the numerator and the denominator. In this case, each of these is divisible by 3. So 24 divided by 3 is 8. 3 divided by 3 is 1. Now, anytime you have a fraction where 1 is the denominator, that's just a whole number. So this is just -8. So this really isn't anything new. We've seen this before. We're just practicing with it. Let's try another example. Okay, now we're adding fractions. Now here I have mixed fractions. The best thing to do would be to first turn your mixed fractions into improper fractions. Some people have trouble with this. We have 3 2/3. So how many thirds is that? Well, each whole number is 3/3. So here we have 9/3 with 2/3 more. So 9 plus 2 is 11. We have 11/3. So this -3 2/3 is -11/3. 4 3/4 Well, how many quarters is that? Each whole number is 4 quarters. So we have 4 of them. That's 16 quarters. Plus 3 more, that's 19 quarters. And because we're adding fractions, we need to have a common denominator. Right now, the denominator is not common. This is 3, this is 4. We need to make them the same. So the easiest way to do that is to just multiply the numerator and denominator in the first fraction by the denominator in the second fraction. So 11 times 4 is 44, 3 times 4 is 12. And then in the second fraction, the numerator and the denominator get multiplied by the denominator in the first fraction, by 3. So 19 times 3 is 57, 4 times 3 is 12. So now we have both fractions with a denominator of 12. We have a common denominator. So because we have a common denominator, we can just now add these two fractions together. Just look at the top. Negative 44 plus 57. Well, that's 13, and it's over 12. So our answer is 13 over 12. And you could write this as 1 and 1/12. That wouldn't be wrong, but we can just stop with the improper fraction. That's fine. In this last example, I have a mixed number. I'm adding a fraction. I'm multiplying by a fraction. So if you have several different operations being done, you have to remember BEDMAS, the order of operations. Brackets, then exponents, then division and multiplication, and then addition and subtraction. So in this expression, we need to do the multiplication before we do the addition. So we're going to do this part first. Now also I'm going to change this into an improper fraction just to make it easier to work with later. So here's my expression. I just changed negative 1 2/3 to negative 5/3. I have to do the multiplication first, so remember when you're multiplying fractions, you multiply straight across. 5 times negative 4. Well, that's negative 20, and 2 times 25 is 50. Now I'm going to just turn it into lowest terms, because that's always good practice. Keep it in lowest terms. And now I can do the addition. So I've kept this first term in there, haven't changed it, but this originally was plus something, but notice I had a positive fraction times a negative fraction. It turned into a negative fraction. And a lot of people get confused when they think of adding a negative or subtracting a negative or something like that, but just watch your signs. It was positive times a negative, now it's negative. That means you're subtracting. So it's negative 5/3 minus 2/5. You don't have to worry about adding a negative or subtracting a negative or whatever. It's just a negative fraction minus a fraction. When we're adding and subtracting fractions, we have to have a common denominator. So I'm going to multiply this by 5 and this by 3. Now we have a common denominator of 15. And now I can just do my subtraction straight across, and I end up with this. Negative 25 minus 6 is negative 31, and the fraction is over 15. So now I just have to double check, is this in lowest terms? Well, yes, it is in lowest terms because there's no number that goes into both of these evenly. So that is the value of the expression. So as you're working through rational numbers and doing operations with them, just remember all the rules for adding and subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And make sure you're doing BEDMAS, the order of operations.